Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi Masechet Sukkah, 1 week at a time. So welcome everyone. We are starting a new Masechet today, and it is very exciting. First of all, if you notice on the screen, this shiur is dedicated by Lynn Job in gratitude of Torah education and outreach in the month of Av and beyond. Thank you very much, Lynn. And we're going to start Masechet Sukkah today. We are going to review Daf 2. Again, those of you who this is their first Masechet, so just a reminder that a Masechet in Gemara starts on page 2, on page Bet. The idea is that we are never beginning and never ending. We are living in the Yam Shel Torah, as they say, the sea of the Torah, and therefore it's as if we already started. So we are starting on Daf Bet. I just want to give a little bit of an overall introduction to Masechet Sukkah. As the name suggests, we are going to discuss the different commandments that pertain to the festival of Sukkot. Specifically in the first chapter, we're going to talk about building the Sukkah, and I'm just preparing you now that there will be a lot of pictures. So get ready. For those of you who like that, great. For those of you who don't, I'm sorry. But we are going to have a lot of pictures about Sukkot. The next chapter will be talking about the subsequent chapters. We'll talk about the Arbat Haminim, the 4 species you can see in the picture on the slide, the 4 species that we take to celebrate Sukkot. We'll discuss that later on in the Masechet. And then I think it's the last parak which discusses the different ways that Sukkot was celebrated in the temple. There were certain things that were unique to Sukkot in the temple, and I will leave that as a cliffhanger for you to make sure everybody stays for the whole Masechet. So again, just review. We are commanded on Sukkot to dwell in a sukkah, which we are going to define in a few minutes, for 7 days. And we have to live there. We kind of move into the sukkah. It's a place where we eat, we relax, we do all the things that we normally do. This is actually a time-bound mitzvah. So to remind us, we actually learned in a previous Masechet that women are actually not obligated in time-bound mitzvot, and therefore women are exempt from sitting in a sukkah. That does not mean that you cannot. It does not mean that you don't get a reward, but it does mean that if there are extenuating circumstances, women do not need to sit in the sukkah. Also, if someone is sick, you do not need to sit in the sukkah. Just for at least in the beginning of this Masechet, when we use the word sukkah, which you'll see in a minute, in the beginning of the Masechet, it's actually referring to the roof. The roof of the sukkah has a special name. It's called the schach. Schach meaning a covering. Again, there are going to be specific laws pertaining to all parts of the sukkah, but in particular to the roof, to the schach. And therefore, that is what we're going to be talking about, and we'll see more of that as we continue. And the last thing I'm just going to say for the introduction is we talked about the roof, we talked about being in the sukkah, and now what about the walls? Presumably, a sukkah has 4 walls. However, the Gemara is going to teach us that there is a minimum number of walls, which is not 4. We'll get to that later on today in our class. And there are certain dimensions that these walls need to have. First of all, in terms of length, and then in height. So that is what we're going to be discussing a lot today and in subsequent classes. Okay, I am now going to share my screen with you. I hope everybody can see. Maybe I'll even make it a little bit bigger so you can see it better. We're going to see a lot of pictures today about different sizes, shapes of the Sukkah. If anybody either lives in Israel or has been in Israel, there is a famous park called Naot Kdumim. And in this, it's actually like a botanical park. And in this park, they actually built various Sukkot models based on the Mishnayot in Masechet Sukkah. So we are going to see some of those Sukkot. Maybe okay, I'll try to remind myself for next time when we get to those interesting Sukkot, maybe to find a picture of it. I definitely have pictures of my kids in various Sukkot. So I'll see if I can find real pictures. But for now, we'll look at these digitalized pictures for now. I see someone mentioned, yes, a granddaughter's bat mitzvah there. Yes, beautiful. So the Gemara mentions that, again, we're on Daf Bet, the first page of Masechet Sukkah, that the schach cannot be over 20 amot. And here is a nice little depiction. You can see the little man here. If you don't know what 20 amot looks like, it's very tall. So over 20, right? 20 would be our maximum height. Over 20 is too tall. The Gemara continues, the Mishnah, continues and tells us the minimum height is 10 tfachim. Let's just review measurements. When I say amma, 20 amma means from the fingertip to your elbow. Okay, I think it's called a cubit in English, but I don't know if that helps anybody. That's an amma. A tefach is a fist. Hand's breadth it says in English, but it's basically a fist. So if you want to figure out, do 10 of these. That's very small, as you can see here, and we'll talk about the minimum size in a minute and what we can do with that. So, okay, so the minimum size is 10 tfachim, hands, and the maximum is 20 amot, 20 cubits. The Mishnah also tells us that the minimum number of walls is 3. We need to have 3 walls, and you need to, we'll discuss what that means in a minute, 3 walls, actually a little bit later on, and the roof needs to be more shade than sun. You can see here they kind of like gave you like this feeling of the shade inside. Again, it cannot be solid. You need to be able to see through the roof, but it cannot be too see-through or too too open, so that there is more sun than shade. That is not acceptable. Okay, that is the Mishnah. The Gemara is going to compare a lot of the measurements of Sukkah to the measurements that we learned in Masechet Eruvin. So for those of you who have been around for a while, you will actually recognize some of these pictures because these pictures were in Masechet Eruvin. Just to remind us, Eruvin discussed making areas communal, right? When you have, let's say, areas that are shared, we want to make them private. How do we do that? There were different ways to do that. One of the things you can see here in this picture is an alleyway. If you can look to the end of the alleyway, there's a wall. So this is called mavoi mifulash, meaning it's closed. Mavoi she'eino mifulash, sorry. It's a closed alleyway, meaning it's closed on 3 sides. There are entrance ways, but only one way into the main thoroughfare, the Reshut Harabim, the street. How do we make an Eruv? How do we basically signal to everybody, either on the inside or the outside, that you are now entering a private domain? There are 2 things that you can do. One is called a lechi. Lechi is this like post on the side of the wall. The other is what's called a korah, maybe like a lintel. I don't know, the top, the top of a, I don't know what the word is, but that beam that goes, a cross beam, that was the word I was looking for, a cross beam that goes across the entranceway. Okay, why is this important? Because in Masechet Eruvin, we learned that there is a maximum height of this korah, right? So this alleyway, we need to put a korah or a lechi, and if the korah is higher than 20 amot, it doesn't count. And you can see here 20 amot, again, being pretty high. But if it's higher than 20, you can see here the wall goes above 20. Therefore, the korah has to be up to 20. So you have to lower that korah to get to 20. So then the Gemara asks, why in Eruvin did it give us a suggestion on how to fix it? But in our Mishnah in Sukkah that we just read, it just says if the Sukkah is too high, it's invalid. Why doesn't it give us ways to fix it? So there are a few answers. One answer is given that the Sukkah is actually biblical in nature; it's deoraita, and therefore we're not messing with it. Meaning, if it's too high, you just bring it down and build it again. The other answer is that it can be fixed, but it's very complicated. So in the Mishnah, we're not going to go into all of the details. Now we have a very interesting three-way machloket, three-way discussion or argument as to why we need it to be within 20 amot. And I'll tell you the three opinions, and then I'll share something that I read that I thought was very beautiful. There are three opinions as to why it needs to be up to 20 amot. One is the verse says in the Torah, in the Bible, leman yid'u, right? The Jews need to sit in a sukkah so that we will know, lada'at, so that we will know that God protected the Jewish people in the desert. So there's this idea of knowing, and if something is above 20 amot, we're just not going to know. What does that mean? I heard two explanations. One is in the old days, right, in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, there are no 10-story buildings, right? There are definitely no skyscrapers. People are not used to looking up, right? There are no planes going overhead. There's no phone lines. People are kind of looking kind of straight ahead. So 20 amot would be, I wonder if we can kind of test it, kind of like the end of your peripheral vision. And therefore, 20 amot is like the highest you're basically going to see or be aware of. It doesn't mean you can't look up. Obviously, everyone can look up, but we want it to be in your consciousness. We want it to be so that you can recognize it. The next opinion why we need it to be within 20 amot is that we need to sit in the shade of the sukkah, of the schach. Now, if you're not, you can even see here, right? If it gets too high, you're going to end up sitting in the shade of the wall and not in the shade of the roof. And that is going to be important. We don't know why yet, but I'll share something in a minute with you. And the last idea is that the sukkah needs to be a temporary dwelling. And the assumption in the Gemara is that a temporary dwelling, meaning it's not made out of bricks and mortar, a temporary dwelling can really only support a roof up to 20 amot, right? But if you build a very large structure, it will not be able to support the schach, and you will end up having to build a permanent structure. And the sukkah, as I mentioned before, needs to be a temporary structure. So I read a beautiful idea. Rabbi Johnny Solomon writes, you can follow him on Facebook. He writes a beautiful idea, like a thought on the Daf Yomi every day. And he wrote a beautiful idea about these three different opinions as to the reason for the schach. And he says, these are three different ways that we can relate to God. So the first one was, again, remember, leman yed'u, so that we will know, right? So one way is ladat, having an awareness of God in our lives. Number two, we said that there needs to be the shade from the schach, from the roof, and not shade from the walls. And he says this is about trust in God, right? Again, God here metaphorically is the roof, right? Coming from above, and it's God that protects us, not the walls, right? Maybe not mankind's things. Again, we also build the schach, but I think the idea is it's supposed to resemble God's protection of the Jewish people. And the last idea is we said that it needs to be temporary. So he says it's this idea of humility, right? Recognizing that our lives are temporary, right? We're only here in this world for a limited amount of time, and we need to make the most out of our lives. So I thought it was just a beautiful way of understanding this disagreement in the Gemara. Okay, let's continue. The Gemara then takes these three opinions and tries to kind of play one against the other. And basically he says, right, again, if it's larger than 20 amot, you're going to get. It's nice. They did it nicely here. You can see here at the bottom the shade from a regular size sukkah looks kind of like slatted because it's coming from the roof. But the big one, the shade is solid because you're getting shade from the walls, right? So that's what we discussed. Shade from the wall versus shade from the roof. However, right, the Gemara says, but wait a minute. If you have a sukkah in the middle of a valley, right here, it's very distinct, right? That's a kosher sukkah, meaning the walls and the schach are all kosher. I mean, you can see the stars from the top, and the shade that you're getting is coming from the mountain. It's not coming from the roof. So that kind of knocks that one out. The next idea is if you make a sukkah very wide, then if it gets very tall, you can still have, you can see here, you can still have the shade coming from the roof, right? Again, those of you who are engineers or architects will understand, right? If it's very narrow, the shade is going to come from the walls. But if it's very wide, the shade will still come from the roof. And the Gemara ends up saying that the truth is that if you have a very wide sukkah, it is okay if it gets above 20 amot. So that was very interesting to understand that idea. Rabbi Yehuda says at the bottom of Daf Bet, of Daf number 2, Rabbi Yehuda says, you know what? A sukkah can even be higher. It can be kosher up till 40 or 50 amot, right? It can be even much, much taller. And the Gemara at the bottom says that Heleni Hamalka, this was a queen. There are a lot of stories about her actually in the Gemara, which are very interesting. But she built a very large sukkah, and it was very, very tall. And the Gemara describes that the sages would come and sit in her sukkah, and they never said anything. So the Gemara seems to prove from here that it could be very, very tall, and it seems to be okay. The Gemara on Daf Gimel, we're going to get back to him in a minute. The Gemara on Daf Gimel, Daf number 3, tells us that maybe Heleni Hamalka's sukkah was actually divided into these compartments. You can see here, and then that would be problematic. Again, we said maybe if it's one very large structure, if you've ever been to a hotel over Sukkot, right there, it's a very large sukkah. So maybe that could be tall. But if it's broken up into these compartments, maybe that would be problematic. Interestingly, the Gemara says, why are you bringing a proof from Heleni Hamalka? She's a woman, so she doesn't need to sit in a kosher sukkah. And the Gemara says, no. First of all, she did want to abide by the law, number one. Number two, she had sons. She had 7 sons. So she wanted to make sure that when she built her sukkah, it would be appropriate or again, within the guidelines of Jewish law. So the Gemara says maybe, again, they're little like, you can see here, like niches in the sukkah, and maybe that was how it would be okay or not okay. And we're basically, the bottom line is we're not going to learn from Heleni Hamalka. Okay, let's get into the minimum size of the sukkah. So the Gemara says that the minimum size of the sukkah, again, we mentioned height is 10 tfachim, again, our hand breadth for anybody who did this. That's very short. But how about width or volume or whatever the word is, right? The interior space. How big is there a minimum? So the Gemara says, and we'll actually see this machloket later on, but here the Gemara says that you need to be able to put it to fit into your sukkah, your head, the majority of your body, and your table. So this was a great picture, right? So the guy is sitting. He has a little end table, and this is kosher. And here the Gemara. So here the minimum, again, interestingly, the minimum is this what's called Rosho Rubo V'Shulchano, his head, most of his body, and his table. And this is that's what that picture was. Sorry, that was 7 tfachim. Okay, 7 tfachim across. That's what this measurement is. You can see most of his body is in here. Interestingly, here he doesn't have a table. That's going to be a machloket, Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, but we're not going to get into it right now. Here we have his table, and this tends to be, again, 7 by 7 tfachim. Another option is that maybe it's 4 by 4. And that's another option. The Gemara says, well, maybe we're talking about this case, which is very interesting. This, I think, we see especially people who live maybe in an apartment building where the sukkah might be quite small, and you basically extend your table from in your house into the sukkah, right? So the Gemara says, you see here, he has his head, his body, and some of his table in the sukkah. The Gemara says this is problematic. Beit Shammai is very concerned that he's going to be pulled into the house, right? Again, he's really sitting just on that edge, and we're very concerned. Beit Hillel says, no, I'm not concerned. Again, as we mentioned, maybe the argument is really about is it with his table or without his table? You could see if you take out the table, it could be smaller. But okay, the Gemara continues and tries to bring a proof from a Braita that talks about houses in general, right? How do you define a house? Now, again, we're going to say, bayit, right, house, and sukkah, which is going to be like our house for 7 days. So maybe these are parallel. So let's maybe learn the minimum size of a house. Maybe that's the minimum size of a sukkah. I can see how that's parallel, but we could also see how maybe that wouldn't be parallel. So the Gemara says that a house that's less than 4 by 4, again 4 by 4 amot, is that true? I think that's true. So a house that is less than 4 by 4. So yeah, it doesn't make sense for tfachim. That doesn't make sense, right? So 4 by 4 amot. So it is right. If you have a little shack and you build it in your backyard, it does not need a mezuzah. It does not need a fence on its roof, right? Lest someone fall over, right? That is a law for building a house. It cannot get tzara'at, leprosy of the house, because it's not considered a house, and it doesn't make a person exempt from going to war. So the Torah tells us that if everybody basically is conscripted into the army, but before they go in, they say if anybody started building a house and didn't finish it or didn't live in it for a year, you can go back home. So the Gemara tells us that a house that's smaller than 4 by 4, that's not considered a house, right? Look at this guy. That's not a house. It looks like an outhouse maybe, but it's not a house, right? That's not considered enough to be exempt from going to war. You cannot put an Eruv into this structure, again, to remind us, Masechet Eruvin. Again, those of you who have learned these Masechtot, I hope you're appreciating all the connections that we've been making throughout our learning. Those of you who haven't, so next time around, Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, so the Gemara says that, again, let's learn Bayit, house, to Sukkah. The Gemara says, no, what are you talking about? A sukkah is a temporary house, and therefore it could be smaller, right? Again, obviously we do have to make a minimum height, minimum internal space, but maybe we can't really compare these houses. Um, the Gemara talks, then goes back and basically goes through all of these cases and explains how this works. Again, a house needs to be 4 by 4 because that describes a permanent house. And therefore, again, as we mentioned, mezuzah, ma'akeh, right, the fence on the roof, those are all things that have to do with a permanent house. It needs to be a place where someone can live in. Again, looking at this guy, I don't think he can live in there for a long time. Kind of seems like a punishment. But again, it needs to be, we want to understand the minimum size, but it needs to be livable, as I would say. The Gemara talks about a house that is in a courtyard that needs to be split up amongst either inheritors like brothers or partners, and talks about how do you split up this inheritance. So that's something that we'll deal with in when we talk about inheritance law. But the question is, how do you divide property, right? Do you divide it, I guess, proportionately? So you can see here in this picture, right? There are 4 houses, but right, 1 house is very large and 3 are very small. The Gemara says that if you have this house that's less than 4 by 4, that's not called a house. That doesn't count as one of these properties. But interestingly enough, there's a machloket, there's a disagreement how you would split up this area, right? Again, these are, do you go by the number of houses, right? So again, if I take these 3 small houses and you take 1 big house, so do I get 3/4, right, of the courtyard and you get 1 because I have 3 houses and you have 1? Or do we say, no, everybody gets the area in front of his house? You can see here very nicely. Everyone gets the area in front of their house, right? You need to be able to go into your house. One could say you get your own parking spot or you get your own front yard. And then the courtyard, the rest of the space is split down the middle. Again, this is in the case that, let's say, there are 2 brothers, right? One is getting 3 small houses, one is getting the big house. We should split the backyard in half. You get half and I get half. So that's actually a machloket. But the bottom line is that your little mini hut, if it was sitting here in the courtyard, it doesn't count. It needs to be at least 4 by 4. Okay. Okay. The Gemara at the bottom of daf number 3, Gimel, says, okay, let's say I have a very tall sukkah. You can see here, very tall, too tall. We said it's above 20 amot. What if I pile, you can see here, I pile cushions. I don't know how you're going to get in there. It looks like it would be fun, but let's say I pile cushions to the bottom, on the bottom of the sukkah. Does this work, right? Because again, if I look at the internal space, right, from the floor to the seal, to the roof, that would now be 20 amot. So does that work? The Gemara says no, this doesn't work. Why? Because as you all know, just thinking about jumping in that sukkah, right? I want to play with those pillows. We're gonna have a pillow fight. They're gonna fall. I'm not comfortable in my bed. I'm gonna take the pillows. These were not the concept here is called bitul. You didn't nullify these pillows, meaning they didn't become the floor of the sukkah. You just put pillows on the floor. But the Gemara says, what if I put straw at the bottom, or dirt or rocks at the bottom? If you nullify it, meaning you say, these, I'm not going to use it. Again, straw in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, I mean also now, but when you said straw, it was seen as either like padding or it was animal food, right? So if I put it at the bottom of my sukkah and then I forget that I didn't feed my animals, right? So I might come and take the straw. Now all of a sudden I lost my platform. So the Gemara says, if you nullify the straw and you say this is now the new floor, then it works. If not, then maybe not. Okay. The Gemara continues and tells us, we raise the floor. Now, what if we lower the roof? you can see here, what if you take branches, which are the material that we make the roof out, right? The schach is the roof is made out of branches. Excuse me, what if I put a lot of branches? You can see here, it looks like a bird's nest actually, but like, what if I put a lot of these branches on the top and I lower the roof? Um, so the Gemara says that if you maintain again that ratio of more shade to sun, then it works. If not, right, again, if it becomes too dense that you can't see the stars, we haven't mentioned that yet, but we will later on. If it becomes too dense or if there's too much sun, so then it is not valid. Okay. Next, the Gemara says, wait, we'll come back to that one. Okay, no, we will not come back to this one. What if, okay, so we raised the floor by putting pillows, we put straw, we put stone, we lowered the roof. Now the Gemara says, what if I build a platform? Okay, that seems very smart, right? I build a platform, and now I have, right, less than 20 amot. Again, from the real floor to the roof is more than 20, but from the platform to the roof is 20. And you can see here very nicely, they put the table and the chair on the platform, right? Because you need to eat in the kosher side of the sukkah. So the Gemara says that works. That works. And as long as that area is 7 by 7, because remember, again, we said the minimum area for the sukkah needs to be 7 by 7, again, tfachim, and therefore, as long as it's 7 by 7, it works. Okay, so that you can see here. Now we're going to learn some very important concepts that we're going to see throughout this masechet. Concept number one is the concept in Hebrew or Aramaic. It's called dofen akuma. The word means a bent wall. Now, if you look at the picture, there are no bent walls, but this is what it means. If you have a sukkah, now here you actually have a house. We actually know somebody. Hold on one second. Can everyone still hear me? I hope you can still hear me. Okay, everyone's back. Okay, I just lost everyone's picture. So, okay, great. Okay, so I don't know if any of you know somebody who I can try to still go back to. Is that better?